Hey, we want to welcome you to Kogen Sunday Service. Each week we gather together. Each week we take some time to figure out how we are going to get spiritually better by taking our love of combat sports and bridging them over to spirituality. As always, I want to take a moment and just thank Kogen Self-Defense Academy for their support, for their encouragement through all this. Just want to especially thank Matt, Bowie, and Rob for the opportunity and the platform that they give me week to week to be able to talk to you guys. So thank you so much for that. Spiritual defense, as you guys remember, is the idea that we are here to defend ourselves against fear, against anxiety, against the depression that this time can bring. It's also to disarm the powers of darkness and the lies that come against us. And finally, it's to defeat these powers and to come out of this victorious, to live free, to find out why we were created and to find out what our purpose is in this world. For the last couple weeks, we've been talking about perseverance. Perseverance, if you remember, is the decision of the will to go through with something even though there is hardship, even though there are obstacles, even though it's difficult or challenging. Perseverance is the power, it's the motivating force that gets us through. And we've kind of broken that down into three different aspects. We've talked about patience. We've talked about patience and how in perseverance, patience is required. We talked about power and how important it is to find that power that allows us to continue to live. Today, we're going to talk about something that I think is kind of more of a byproduct or more of a consequence of perseverance, but that is the idea of perspective. Now, perspective is simply a way that you look at something. Perspective is the way that when you take something and begin to examine it, you find some different angles, some different ways to be able to approach it. And this is no different than in combat sports, right? When we go into a ring, when we go onto the mats, we look at our opponent and we begin to decide what our perspective is going to be. Are we going to be offensive? Are we going to be defensive? Our perspective on something is also what allows us to be able to continue to persevere even when something is difficult. Let's face it, most of you guys know by now that jiu-jitsu, that Muay Thai, that this whole idea of training is a lifelong process. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a week or two. We don't get to become an expert. We don't get to become a master anytime soon. And so that requires a great level of perseverance, and perspective is that ability that's going to allow you to be in it for the long haul. You know, when I think about that perspective, I think so often about the idea that some of the things that we learned, whether it be just a movement or a drill or a stance, in our perspective at that moment, it seemed kind of useless, didn't it? It seemed like it wasn't going to apply. As a matter of fact, we had more questions than answers. And we didn't even understand why our instructor was telling us to do the thing that we were doing. We wanted to get to the good stuff, right? We wanted to get to the fun stuff, to the exciting stuff. Well, here's the perspective. As we begin to look at how perspective shapes our perseverance, we have to understand that if we have just short-term and immediate instant gratification goals, especially in things like combat sports and spirituality, we are going to become very dejected, very depressed, very disenchanted quickly, aren't we? Yeah, because none of that comes easy. But our perseverance, as we look at perspective, that perspective is going to drive the opportunity we have to persevere. So what does all that mean? Things don't feel like they're changing very quickly, do they? Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3 sometime down the road, and it's easy to just really start to think, man, this is the worst. Well, our perspective allows us to see that day by day we can get better. When we take this into the spiritual realm, we recognize the same thing. We don't develop a life of faith and belief. We don't develop a life of discipline overnight. It takes time. It takes experience. It takes wisdom. And all of those things come with perspective. You know, this whole idea of perspective and perseverance, is captured for me in a story. There was once a bricklayer, and as he was building and putting block up, he was whistling and humming to himself, and as someone walked by, they looked at him and said, "Don't you get tired and bored of doing the same thing over and over again, every brick, every block, over and over again?" The man replied, "I'm not building with bricks. I'm building a cathedral." You see, he had a long-term perspective. It occurs to me that we are called in the Bible to persevere, to continue on. But the only way that we can do that is if we have the perspective that we need to have, that this is not all that there is an eternity to come, that there is a peace that awaits us, that there is a reward that awaits us, that there are things that we have yet to see that we don't even realize that we are contributing to, that are greater than anything that we could ever understand right now. So with that comes an empowerment and an encouragement to all of you. You know, in the book of Galatians, it tells us, don't get tired of doing what is good. It's easy right now to get real self-centered. It's easy right now to just think about how all of this is impacting me. But the ability that we're going to have in perspective to look around, to help those around us, to continue to get better spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically is going to pay off. So as we close out this idea of perseverance, it's important for us just to remember that we have to be patient. We have to recognize that that power of perseverance comes from understanding where we're going, and that our perspective will shape our future and our goals. I can't wait to see you guys again next week to talk to you about another spiritual defense. Thank you guys again so much for clicking on, for watching this. If you've got questions, if you need something, please don't hesitate to call me. Thank you guys again, and I will see you real soon.